Hello and welcome to Tabletop Oddity. My name is Jay and today we're going to be looking at the basic builds and the lists for the two new vehicles that are released for Star Wars Legion or coming out next week. Depends where you live, depends if you can have them right now, but we've got all the stuff that we need to have a look at lists and builds and all that kind of stuff, so that's what we're going to do. Now before we do that, if you like the video, then at the end of the video press like, and if you're not already subscribed, also consider pressing subscribe please. Thank you very much. And yeah, so the two new vehicles, we've got the, well, I'm not going to give it its full name, or shall we? It's the TX225 GAVw Occupier Combat Assault Tank and the Landspeeder. I'm not even going to bother with the full name for that. And we're just basically going to look at basic builds, the clues in what I said at the start. So let's crack on. Let's crack on and do that. So what have we here? So the combat tank. It's a big combat tank, it's on a new base, it's all very interesting. The card itself, armor, Arsenal 2, reposition, transport, which is something we will discuss, and it's got a weak point at the side. So there's a couple of things that you can take instead of this is my chosen build personally. I think the Surge to Crit Pilot is very strong, very powerful. And the fact that you already have Arsenal 2 means you might as well take an extra weapon. And this range 1 to 4, 2 red dice, impact 1 DLT is, for me, bob on. That alone is 183 points. So, yeah, I think that's okay. We'll have a look at the different pilots and stuff. Shall we do that now? Yes, we shall. Pilot-wise, these are the 3 you can take. We've always had Vs, obviously. Tactical 1 from the First Sergeant Mab. I actually really like him for 5 points. I think that's pretty strong. The only reason I wouldn't take that is I think Surge to Crit, sorry, I said Surge to Crit before. Surge to Hit is just so much stronger for vehicles that, you know, for a vehicle that doesn't have any surges. I really like that option. 10 points to get a Surge to Hit. I like it. I like that. And for the weapon, you can have the DLT weapon, or if we get rid of it, for the hard point, you could also have the rifle pin tile, which is the both range 1 to 4, which I guess is good. And instead of that 2 red dice, you get 1 red dice and 3 white dice. It's sort of like take your pick your poison. I like the 2 red dice personally. It's got impact 1 as well for 4 extra points. If you're going to take the Surge to Hit pilot, then you could argue that having white dice is fine. But yeah, I'm just going to take that. I think that for me is a really standard basic way of getting that assault tank on your table. Now, the kind of list you want to run that in, you know, some Vias and something, you know, it's hard to say exactly what. I don't really think you want to use this to be transporting Vader, which is a lot of people were thinking, because, you know, you can put Vader in it. You can get him up the board a bit more safer than you would have been able to. However, I think the tank's, 180 with that. With Vader, you're looking at 400 points. That's half your army just for those 2. It's potentially doable, but I think I personally wouldn't be putting my eggs in that basket. I'd just be rocking Vias and then Boba. Probably Vias, Boba, snipers and DLTs. That's essentially the list I would rock there. And yeah, I think that's fine. You can argue about the other pilot getting the aim. It's pretty strong, but you're generally just going to move into position and then just shoot all game. So you probably aim and shoot most of the game rather than move and shoot. It might be good for the first turn, but I think you might get more use overall from the Surge to Hit. Now, not necessarily relevant, but slightly relevant, is what does this do to the ATST? And I think this makes the ATST a little bit more viable. Specifically that new pilot that gives you the Surge to Hit. With that card, you get Surge to Hit, you get Surge to Defense already. You've already got Arsenal 2. Yeah, I like that. I think that's got more potential than what it would have had without it. And the weapons, well, you can't have Arsenal 4 because we can't have Vs. So you take the range 4 one, so when you're at range 4, you've got a really powerful shot. And beyond range 4, you can still pick people off with that suppressive stuff. And then you take the range 1 to 2 because then you ignore cover with the blast, with the grenade launcher. Yeah, I think that's really powerful. It is 230 points, but if you're going to rock an ATST, I think that's a pretty strong way of doing it. Yeah, you could argue just take one of the weapons off, maybe the range 1 to 4 one, the range 4 plus for the mortar launcher, and just try and get into range 2 and just pepper away. But I wanted to throw that in there because that new pilot really potentially buffs the ATST. I don't really think that the Tactical 1 pilot guy is that great, because generally you move quite far because you're on such a big base anyway that you're not going to be moving that often. Generally maybe once or twice a game. So I prefer the surge to hit. I think that's really quite powerful. So there's not much to say there. It's just that's the tanks. You could argue maybe you want to take the other pilots in certain situations, but for me, this is a really standard, I think, a standard way you'll see it ran. So be ready for that, I guess. It's got Arsenal 2, so you could actually argue whether or not to even take this second card, because the only reason I've had it on here is it's 18 points. You get an extra impact, 2 red dice, pretty strong. But if you're going to get into range 2, then you lose the red dice and you gain suppressive, and you swap a red for a black, I should say. Potentially really strong. I guess that one doesn't say fixed front, so if you're getting flanked or whatever, that could be more useful. But you already have 2 weapons essentially at range 2, so do feel free to not actually take the extra guy and just take the extra weapon and just try and keep the points minimal. I think that's also viable. Moving on to the Rebels and the Landspeeder, the X-34 Landspeeder. This for me is a really interesting unit. I think the tank is probably better overall, like more cost effective. Just my personal opinion there. But for sure, this Landspeeder, it offers you something different, but I'm not sure it's overly cost effective. So this exact build here that I have on the screen is 145 points, which is obviously quite high. And I'm not necessarily sure it is the best or the most cost effective. So you get Armor 2, yeah, it's at Arsenal 3 there, which is like, maybe it's baiting me into wanting to take 3 weapons. And the light transport we'll get onto in a minute when I talk about a full list. Speeder 1, yeah, we already knew about that. So let's have a look. We'll get rid of the rocket gunner and we'll have a look at the pilots that you can take. Well, there's an extra pilot here that increases your speed by... you can increase or decrease your speed by 1 for 5 points. And I actually like that, but not necessarily in this build. So pilots I wouldn't necessarily bother with personally. I don't really think they offer you too much. But the crew... you could have both of these. I think it's got 2 crew slots, but you only can shoot 3 weapons, so I don't necessarily think it's worth having more than 3 guys. So in this case, I wouldn't necessarily take this one because it's range 1 to 3 and it's 2 white dice. Well, you come with 2 white dice anyway, so you're just sort of getting more of the same, but it is quite cheap. This one where it's 2 to 4, I like the fact that it's range 4, and I like the fact that it's impact. It's sort of, I won't say cheap impact for the Rebels, but it's if you're going to take a Landspeeder, it's sort of easy-ish to acquire impact. So for me, I'm taking the rocket gunner. And then the medium blaster we'll look at. These are hard points, so these are the weapons that you can take. You can basically take 2 for the Landspeeder, and the first one there, the ion blaster, is a exhausted card for 38 points. I just don't think exhausted is getting in the meta anytime soon. I don't think it's that great. That impact, don't think it's worth it. The ion, we spoke about ion a little bit in some of my videos. I think ion is priced because it would be very disruptive to vehicles, so they want to price it high and have them as exhaustible, which I understand, but it probably means unless vehicles flooding the meta, that you're not going to see an ion card. So I'm discarding that one. And that range 1 to 3, 4 black dice. Not going to lie, I think that's pretty solid. So there you sort of make use of everything. You've got 3 weapons for your Arsenal 3. You've got impact 2. You've got quite a lot of dice. If you're shooting at range 2, you can literally shoot all of those, which is what? There's 4, 7, 9 dice in one attack. Yeah, I think it's pretty good. However, it is quite expensive, 145 points right there. And you don't have armor fully. You've got this armor 2, which sort of cancels some of the hits, but not all of the hits. So, it's interesting. It's interesting. Now, you could argue to take the extra cover on this guy because of the armor 2. You actually might want the cover. I've not actually done the master. I'm not really sure how good that would be. So what kind of list would I throw the Landspeeder in? Well, either just you pump it in any list like that, which I think is okay. But there is an alternative here, which is to use the transport. So I spoke about how for the assault tank, I wouldn't really transport Vader. And if you're not transporting Vader, like, who else are you trying to get to a place? Maybe Bubba, but you could do, but you're actually worsening Bubba's save, so not sure that's great. Maybe Vias if you just want to keep him safe, maybe. I'm not really sure. But for the Rebels, I think it might be a little bit different. You could throw it in as a cheap unit without many upgrades and maybe make use of it by throwing a Luke in there or something like that. Personally, I think this is the best build, but I just wanted to talk about transport very briefly. And this isn't to say this is the best Luke Leia list in the universe, but this is Luke Leia and 5 units of Z6 troopers, pretty solid, and 3 units of snipers. There is actually another unit of sniper at the bottom of that, as you can see there. This is at 785 points at the moment, and that's because I would take the pilot here that can increase or decrease your speed by 1, and basically you're going to make yourself movement 3 and get Luke in a position where you really want him to get out and start smashing face. It's not, I don't rate that necessarily, but the Landspeeder at that point is only 80 points, but you're not getting too much for those 80 points. Like, you're not going to be pumping out that much damage with 2 white dice. So but I'd rather take an AT-RT. I think, unfortunately, I don't think the Landspeeder has got its A game. I think for all of the other options, I think the AT-RT is perhaps a little bit better at doing that. And the only role that the AT-RT can't really do is speed. Fair enough, right? And it can't really be, it can't transport units. So this is one where you want to transport a unit, maybe Luke, as I said, pretty much only Luke. It's the only reason to put this in here. I'd say it's doable. It's not something I personally would do. I would maybe ditch a Z6 or a sniper or something and tank up the Landspeeder there, just because I think that's overall better, whether or not that Landspeeder build though is actually really expensive. So I'm not off the bat really rating the Landspeeder. I think it's an incredibly good looking model. I look forward to playing with it a couple of times, but I don't see it hitting the realms of competitive play, if I'm honest. And I think the Occupier tank is more likely to see competitive play, but again, I don't necessarily think vehicles are actually in a great position even so, but this makes them a little bit better. It's like a cheaper ATST basically. Having maybe 6 decent dice to throw out at range either 4 or 2 depending on what guy you take with that surge for 180 odd points, 183 in this case. I think you've got that transport ability if you do want to use it. I don't think you necessarily want to pay the points and have that and the Vader, but some people might want to try that and have it be a bit of a gimmick, and that could work for sure. And I think the actual key thing that from that expansion is potentially making the ATST a little bit more viable. So that's my thoughts there on some, like, I say basic building lists, but really it's just one list. Talking about the Occupier tank, I said you're whacking an Occupier tank, you're whacking Bomber Vias, DLTs, snipers, your jobs are donezo. You just get as much of that in as you wish. For the Rebels, you've got that 2 options. You either tank it up and then just take whatever you want with it, or you can take it as a transporting unit, really dead cheap, take the pilot who increases your speed. That's an option. So overall, these units are fun, I think. I think the Imperial one is, when I say better, obviously you pay more points for it, but I think it's probably a little bit more cost effective than the Rebel one. But the Rebel one I think is going to be a fun unit to play with. So obviously I could be proven wrong, these could be meta game changes, but my instinct says no. But we'll see what happens in the future, of course. Let me know your thoughts. Did I miss an obvious combination that people will run and you're like, Jay, you missed this. This will be the way people play it. Let me know that in the comments below. As ever though, if you like the video, do like the video. And if you're not already subscribed, please do subscribe. I have a Patreon and all that kind of good stuff if you want to join me there. And I'm dying in this room. It's very hot because I had to close the window because somebody was lawn mowing because it's a hot sunny day. Stay indoors, don't go outside. And I had to shut the back door because it looks weird when the door's open. So have a most beautiful day though. Thank you for watching and goodbye.